Hello and welcome to the One Body, One Life podcast. Hi, I am your host, Dr. Jason One, lifestyle physical therapist. You guys know me. I am a person that loves to bring other guests on that want to speak about their own journeys through mental and physical health. And I really value a lot of the relationships I get to build literally around the world. For one, we have somebody that's literally living thousands of miles away in Vietnam and not from Vietnam, but he's made a lot of
Yeah.
massive life changes and decisions that made him successful, that's made him happier, that's made him more fulfilled, and that's enhanced his mental health. So today we have Ken Stearns, and the topic of today is really speaking to the mental health side of health, but also at the same time, making the right decisions in your life, even making the right sacrifices so that you too can
Mm.
also feel more fulfilled. So, Ken, welcome in. How are you doing today?
Good, Jason. Thanks for having me, and it's good to be back in the meeting room with you. And then, like you said, even though now I'm a little bit farther away than I was last time we chatted.
Yeah, no worries at all. Ken, I value the conversation that we had before, and that's why I wanted to definitely bring you on here because you can provide so much value to the audience that I currently serve. So why don't you just start off with just a brief introduction about yourself? So yourself, what's your background,
Yeah,
and why are we talking about mental health today?
yeah, it's great. It's a great reflection for me because I'm back in Vietnam, which is where I left about 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago, I excuse me, decided to pack up the corporate career and go back to the US. I had spent 22 years over in Asia being an insurance executive, and one of these great opportunities to travel around all of Asia for 22 years and live in about 4 or 5 countries, lead teams, sales teams, distribution teams, high performing job, high stress job, and just lovely experience. But in the end, as I found myself back in Vietnam after a few years, I was 2 years here during COVID, and really at the end of that, I felt disassociated with the job, disassociated with the career, really at the end of corporate life. I think I had been through quite a blender, it felt. And I still remember, and I just saw the video the other day, and I had made this iPhone video after I had said, I quit, I'm done. Went to the CEO's office and said, I think this is it. In January, I'm going to head back to the US and hang up my corporate spurs. And I got back to the apartment that night, and it's a gigantic emotional release that I felt like I just wanted to capture my emotion and just dictate into the phone and just say, hey, I'm a free man. And that lifting up of just all this kind of this weight on your shoulders every day, every week, just a fantastic feeling. And then I spent two years plus traveling the US. I had put a plan together, traveling the US, interviewing people in their homes. This is a really big adventure that I had planned. It took me 2 years. I went to 96 cities, interviewed 330 people,
Mm,
sat down in their living rooms with this giant jar of questions and had conversations with them about life and their lives and their life experience, what you do on a podcast.
mhm.
Super valuable time spent with some amazing people and hearing stories of people overcoming life challenges and turning them into opportunities. So I spent 2 years doing that, interviewed 330 people, and I felt pretty refreshed. And I felt
Mhm.
like a completely different person and put life in perspective. Changed me, probably feels almost like at a cellular level, those kind of interactions and the human stories, and
Mhm.
found myself coming back to Asia. When I wrapped up the whole tour, I reached out to people and said, hey, I'm going to start doing some public speaking. I want to share some of my life experiences. And the first people to reach out to me were people from Asia, and specifically people in Vietnam. So I found myself back on the airplane, and here I am. Like I said, we were chatting before, meeting some people, meeting old friends. I've had nothing but coffees and noodle lunches, just having a great time getting back with old friends. And from a different perspective now, feel much different. It's a very different environment for me because I'm a different person.
That's really good to hear, man. And I'm very happy for the situation that you're in. And obviously, we got to connect and I got to speak about my story. And I'm sure that you just interviewing all these people is something that lights you up. There's something that I'm currently doing right now. And I do it like once quarterly. It's called like a time energy audit, where basically I see
Mm,
the amount of time that I spend in my business, spend with my family. So, like every 15 to 30 minutes, I actually write into a journal things that light me up, things that suck up my energy. So you make green and
Mm,
red highlighters. You say to yourself, if these are the things that really light me up, I'm going to keep these things in my life. Things that are potentially red highlighter or
yeah,
that drain my energy, I either am going to get rid of it completely or I'm going to delegate
right.
it to somebody else, especially if it's still beneficial to my business. So I feel like we can hit on so many topics because I know you have just so much even more experience as a businessman than me. So I wanted to hit on a couple things like the word high achiever. I wanted to dive into kind of like the balance between like money and health. I think that's a good topic to talk about. Why
Mm,
don't we start off with high achievers? I think you perceive yourself as a high achiever. It depends on the persona, right? If you do this
yeah.
personality test,
Yes.
people
Yeah.
can, in the Myers-Briggs, I think I was labeled as a person that's try to be overachiever. If you're not achieving, you're depressed. And that's where
Ooh.
I'm at. So how do you define somebody like a high achiever and how does mental health kind of play into this high achievement state? What are some things that if you are a high achiever, what are some things that they might want to look out for?
Yeah. When you say that, when you say the high achiever, that phrase, it brings up to me people that are in stress, under stress.
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't know that I get a good, warm, and fuzzy feeling with the phrase high achiever. I think you cannot stay at that status for a long time. It
Mhm.
would be my gut reaction. Very
Yeah.
difficult to stay at that level for a long time, to sustain a high achieving status, even if you're in your green zone. It's a
Mhm.
very hard place to stay. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of sacrifice. I don't know you can always balance the family life or your personal life, right? Because I think
Mhm.
to me, a high achiever in life at a broader term might be something that's beautiful. But I think high
Mhm.
achiever, we normally associate it with work or sports, and
Right.
there's a lot of sacrifice that's made. I just did one of the presentations that I'm doing here. I was invited out to do some sharing, and one is a technical kind of a sales management workshop. That went great. I'm just doing now one for high achieving insurance professionals. So there's a
No.
club called an achievement level called MDRT, Million Dollar Roundtable, and these are for high achieving insurance professionals, and it's a global status, global recognition, and you can apply for it in any country you're in. And in Vietnam here for one of the company that I was speaking to, we had about 50 people in the last session, and I was in the central part of the country. We had a great session. And the first part, it's a three-part kind of presentation. And the first part is really talking about how your brain works. And these are people who are trying to get to this level. They're right there, but they're not quite achieving it, right? So they're really good
Mhm.
performers, but they
Mhm.
haven't achieved higher status.
Got it.
And so the first part is really about how your brain works and you think about the same thoughts. And if you want to become this person, you have to change the way you think. You have to
Absolutely.
think about what you're thinking about in order to become a different person. You literally need to become a different person if you are going to become an MDRT. You
Yes.
can't be who you are today. And there's going to be sacrifices. The middle part of the conversation, I talk about some of the elements of flourishing, 7 parts of flourishing. And the last part's like, you're in a great person. I get up and do a little motivation. But that
Mhm.
middle part has got one of the components is mental health. It's mental health, physical health, your diet, what you eat. These are the kind of the keys, as well as your professional health, your social health, spiritual health. And so there's these 7 components. And this one, after we went through all the journaling, each topic we covered, and we got to the sharing part where we asked a couple of
Mhm.
people to share. And this woman who I remember from the night before at the gala dinner, she's very elegant, had a gorgeous dress. She looked super top on her game, walking around. And I remember her out of the 50 people, just a beautiful human, and just looked like she was in it. She was in the game. And she stood up and started to share her story, and it just killed the room. She had an enormous mental health problem. She
Mhm.
was really trying to achieve the numbers, really trying to do things for work, and she had work and life. And she started to share that she literally lost her hearing from the stress of life.
Oh.
She and it was a mental, and she went into the doctor, said, "You're fine. You're physically fine. It's all in your head. You are creating this terrible situation in your own mind."
Mhm.
And she talked about her struggles and couldn't sleep at night, having difficulty in the relationships. difficulty in the job, and it debilitated her. Physically ended up debilitating her. And she didn't say it, but 100% certain part of the conversation was I thought often about taking my own life. She was in that bad of a place. And she got out one day and she started walking around the block at 3 in the morning. And then she started running and she felt better. And she started running the next night. She couldn't sleep. And then she started waking up early to run.
Mm-hmm.
And then now she's running every day, 5, 6, 7 kilometers, two
Wow.
something miles.
Yeah.
And the conversation, her sharing was so powerful in the room. People crying, there's people crying. I'm getting the translation, but I can just feel the emotion. And I'm just from her emotion, I'm trying to even hold back my own tears because it was just such a powerful sharing. But it's
Yeah.
also that reminder of as you get to this place, as you're trying to achieve it, there is so much difficulty for humans because we're not meant to stay at this level. We're not meant to do things that are a little bit unnatural at times. And finding the physical aspect, like what you talk about, right? The health part of her, she found her mental health, she found her ability to achieve by employing physical work. And it
Yeah.
took her brain and relaxed her brain and allowed her to look at life in a perspective. And so it's just a really interesting story for me. Just happened about 3 days ago and probably affect me for quite some time. And to know that the conversation, the presentation that I put together and the opportunity for her to share was what brought her the courage to share the story.
That's amazing. I want to take a pause just to let other people let that sink in. I think a direct reflection of the word a high achiever can often comes with the lowest of lows. It's like you can try to
Yeah.
achieve so much financially. I think that most people that perceive, whether you see a high achiever or you yourself are a high achiever, are very much oftentimes associated with like high amount of stress, high amount of responsibility, and putting
Mhm.
pressure on yourself to achieve. And
Yes. Yes.
that's that's I think where I've been. I just to tell you a story, and I don't think it hits as hard as that gorgeous woman in the room, but when I started my business 2019, 2020, and it was in the heart of the pandemic, and I was starting a lot of my online stuff, I couldn't really see people in person because it
Hmm.
was COVID. So a lot of people were stuck at home. And I remember times where I just felt like a shell of myself. I would wake up feeling almost depressed. I would just walk a few steps. Like my bedroom was very close to my desk. So I would
Oof.
actually just,
So
yeah,
dangerous.
bedroom and separating office and like bedtime, not a good thing. And I remember one day my wife came up to me and she seemed a little concerned. She'd obviously knew I was working long hours, but she's like, "You look pale, and you look skinnier." It's like you look, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I haven't even been weighing myself." I found out I lost 14 pounds, like
Whoa.
literally 14 pounds of
Whoa.
muscle. My body felt old. It didn't feel good, and I remember that was a time where like I broke down and cried in front of friends and family because I was like, "Yeah, I don't know if I'm cut out for this," and it's because I feel like I'm a high achiever.
Yes.
And I think when it comes down to it, like you got to see how high achiever, I really love how you said high achiever of life, not high achiever of like your finances, because you can have a beautiful nest egg, but still be very
Oh,
empty inside.
be a wreck.
Right. So I think that it's just good to hear that. What would you say to somebody that maybe they are really trying to achieve a lot financially because it's more tangible. You can see the
Yeah.
cards, you can see people can see it, your clothes, your watch, your Rolex, it's all that. What would you say to somebody that is a high achiever, but maybe seemingly letting other parts of their life go downhill or
Mm.
they're not taking care of those parts?
Yeah, I'd come back to this story in the presentation, what I was trying to communicate to the team, the group of people there is you can do this once. Anybody can muscle your way to the top. You can do it, right? In whatever profession you're in, you can do it. You will get there. And I've seen this in corporate life so many times over the 20 something years working with a lot of expats, right? Foreigners who are come into this is a developing for my business. It's a developing financial market. On the maturity level, it's still in the lower middle end and it's starting to grow. And over that time, you bring in a lot of people with experience from other countries to share and manage and lead teams and develop people. And these are all high achievers. If you end up with a job in another country in a specific area, you are a professional in that. You've got a lot of value and you would be considered a high achiever. That would be the only way you would get the role. You do see a lot of people coming in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years and gone. And gone not because they wanted to, but because they just couldn't hack it. They couldn't balance. And hacking it, meaning they might have been performing well at the job, but there's just so many other parts, right? There's that you've got to have some social network because things are going to happen. Like your story, right? At some point you were in front of friends and family. That's who saw you at your worst. You need that social network. You got to be eating right. You have to be exercising. So you have to be mindful of what you're putting in your body and also how you're tuning the body up, because you could get that financial ring. You can reach up and grab it, but you might be nearly broken when it's happening. And you can, like I said, you can muscle your way there for a while, but this will come crumbling down. I've got enough gray hair to say I've seen where this story happens. You've got to have a spiritual connection of some way, shape, or form. But it doesn't have to be a God, but you got to be very much in touch with yourself spiritually and you got to know thyself. And you have to really have those conversations when you look in the mirror. Are you comfortable with who you are? Are you comfortable with what you're doing? Do you feel good when you lay down at the end of the night? You got to have these conversations. You've got to develop yourself professionally, Jason. You can't do what you do with the same knowledge you had 3 years ago or 4 years ago. You have to invest in yourself because the environment's changing, the market's changing. So I think if you're measuring it solely by financial wealth and your financial status, then you will succumb to a very narrow view in life. The other parts you cannot ignore. It'll eventually catch up to you.
Yeah. I think you hit some really valuable points. There's a couple quotes and things that I've talked about in the past. And I think that one quote that stuck out to me, it was some sort of like fitness influencer that I think is one of the more honest ones, not all about just like the six pack and things. And it was really promising. He said that you shouldn't be measuring your worth as a high achiever off of how much you earn. It's how much you spend. It's how much time you spend with your family and friends. I thought that was really powerful because we focus so much on the tangential things, the things that we can see, the clothes, the cars.
Yeah.
I think that all of that is great. If you're a believer like myself in God that feels that, okay, well, you can't really take that up to wherever you are, but you're going to measure your life off of the memories that you've had with other people. And I think that when I hear that, that's one of the things that puts me to tears is when I'm with my family and I'm with my friends or just staring into my kids' eyes, you're present. And that type of moment that you have with your family, it really makes your life feel that much more valuable and that much more fulfilled. And you can have $2 in your bank account and still be an extremely happy person. You can have $1 million and be absolutely ashamed of yourself. And
Absolutely.
right?
I think there's more of the latter than the former. I think there's a lot more millionaires that are absolutely miserable than there are people with just happy with the money they're making.
No, for sure. So I think for people to be a high achiever, sometimes you have to kind of like pull yourself back. If you're a high achiever, sometimes you need to just kind of unveil the curtain and be like, what's most important in my life? And maybe sometimes you have to take a step back and be like, if I continue to just rev my engine to 120 miles an hour, eventually my engine's going to burn out. I'd rather take a step back once in a while and just live, just be present with your family around you, go for a run like that one lady that is running every day because it clears up and it's improved her mental health dramatically. There's just so much about high achieving that you can be an achiever in so many other ways. And it's not just about your financial wealth for sure. But I guess the next thing I want to talk about is just how people are measuring their self-worth around, let's say, around money. And I think that money is one thing, but how does somebody take potentially, let's say if they do have a lot available to them financially, what can they potentially do to be more serviceable to others? Do they just continue to grow and just donate, or what would be some ways in which they can manage or utilize their finances for the good of other people and maybe the good for themselves?
once you're at that level, the people that I've seen that are the happiest, they find a way to eventually let the work for them, the job. Excuse me, sorry, my kind of morning voice. As people get, you're high achieving for a while, and at some point, like you said, the money runs out of value to you. And whether you're of lower means or whether you really are rich, I think at some point money loses its value to you, and you start to cherish the other things. Now, the sad people are ones running until they're dead. And you don't meet many people, you don't hear any stories of people on deathbed saying, I wish I made more money.
Yeah.
All those stories involve, I wish I spent more time with people, I wish I made more friends. Yeah, I wish I wasn't such a jerk, wasn't
Mhm.
so short with people. Summarize it.
Right.
So finding a way to connect to other people. And this, I think, is really what drove me to do the jar. After spending a career, that life insurance really is about several things. It's about many things, but one of them is being there for people in the dark times, giving hope, what I call bringing hope in a dark time. You're the insurance person and something terrible happens to a family. The hope is that person took time out to insure themselves, to
Mhm.
prepare for the family, to make sure that to send a little bit of how do you have a car out, you fall off the motorbike and you're dead, you get hit by a falling tree, who knows what happens. It's a way to send love from the grave. It's a way to say, I love you. I sacrificed some time and some money and I set it aside just in case this happened.
Mhm.
And I'm sending this little love note in the form of an insurance payment. People get to a place where the money is not as important as the human connection. And like I said, I really sacrificed a career, unplugged from corporate, to get out and get in touch with people, even though I was working through others in my career, right? I wasn't the insurance agent anymore. I was so far removed from it that I really wanted, although I'm coaching people and helping young executives, still felt like I needed to get so far down into the dirt and to hear people's stories and to sit in a living room with them with this jar of questions and just ask them to tell their story and share that story so other people could hear just exactly what we're doing. So other people can hear your version of life and how you made it through or are making it through. And so I think it's high performance. At some point, you've got to be high performing in other areas of your life. And so I think ditch the money at some point and you will find infinite happiness elsewhere.
Yeah. That's really good to hear. And one of the things that lights me up, and I think is part of my profession and what my MO is just fitness. It's not telling people, it's inspiring people through action on how I take care of my mental health, how I take care of my
Mm,
body. And I think that a product of my quality of life and helping other people with their quality of life is teaching them to
yeah.
be stronger, is teaching them the right exercises so that they feel better on a daily basis, teaching them the right nutrition and the right habits necessary
Mm.
so they could achieve more, not just financially, but also have the body that can withstand all the sacrifices that you're putting through your body, all the on your computer, making phone calls, trying to make more clients, trying to make more money. Another aspect of that is indeed it is your physical and your mental health. So like you said with that one lady, it's like she just started running, which is it's physically demanding, but it translated very much so to
Oof.
her regaining her mental health, a sense of sanity again.
Yeah. Well, side story on that, you're talking about getting your strength together during during COVID, as I was wrapping up my book, planning the podcast journey, knew I'd be on the road for 2 years, in and out of hotels, driving, changing cities every 4 days. Just this
Mhm.
manic, crazy, silly schedule I designed. A very high achieving schedule.
Yeah.
I was trying to every 4 days, literally changing a city, trying to do 4 interviews in a town. It's just absolutely bananas when I look back on it. You talk about a high achiever left with a dream and a pen, and I really set some crazy goals. One of the things that I was manic about for the last 6 months, 8 months was exercising 4 or 5 times a week.
Mm.
Even though we were in COVID, I started doing gym sessions with my trainer through Zoom. I would just set my phone up so he could watch me in a particular exercise. And we had worked together. So I knew the drill pretty well. I knew form quite well, but needed that guidance to make sure I had the technique.
Yeah.
But I got into probably the best shape of my life at 60, 59 to 60, just preparing for this because I knew how important it would be to have my physical health absolutely at a peak when I started. And because I knew I would not maintain it over the 2 years. I knew myself, I'm going to get in it's going to be very hard for me to stay motivated. And so I bulked it in for 2 years. So you can't always stay in a routine, but if you do know you have to find the time and think ahead of where you can put that resource, right? Which part are you balancing? Your mental health side, your physical side. Are you going to not be able to eat correctly for the next 4 months or 4 weeks? So you better make sure you got a good clean diet and focus on your diet now, because sometimes you can't always control where you're going to be and what you're going to eat. So I think that being self-aware of what's happening in that balance of those 7 kind of flourishing components, and knowing which ones you're going to sacrifice and which ones you can lean into during a period of your life.
I always perceive that when I think about a business owner or an executive or high achiever, is you have these balls that are juggling, and all these balls you're trying to balance because you're wearing multiple hats in your business if you're
Yeah.
starting off, or maybe you're making 7 figures and you're already wearing a ton of hats. So you're managing a team. Regardless, you're still balancing and juggling a ton of balls. And you got your family, and you got your mental health, and you got your exercise, and everything else that kind of makes a human. And at some point, you're like, okay, I always hear this question on all these forums, like, how do you achieve balance amongst all that? And my take on things is, instead of trying to achieve balance, I think you should be okay with imbalance, because there may be
Yes.
times where I think there's a season where you're like, hey, I'm going to dedicate 6
Absolutely.
months to really improving my strength, my resilience, and get into good
Yes.
shape. And that may be an emphasis point where you put a lot of work into that, and then you let a ball fall on the floor. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that you can't just pick it back up, because I think what you should try to do is not try to balance everything and give like 20% here, 20% here, 20% here.
Yeah.
And all
Yes.
of a sudden you're doing a half-assed job in all of these categories. You'd
Interesting.
rather do, I
Interesting.
think, a great job of, let's say if you want to
Huh.
work on your physical health, which I can help you with that, but if you worked on that for 6 months, you're likely going to build some sort of mental fortitude and habits that's going to carry
Yes.
on, that even when you're juggling the ball, that ball is seemingly able to be like higher in the air.
Mm.
It floats in the air a little bit more. It's easier to
Yeah.
catch. And so you don't have to worry about as much about your physical health, because you've built in a habit of that. And now you can focus on some other aspect of your health, your career, whatever it is. And I'm not sure if you agree with that, but I always try to achieve balance since like 2020, 2021. And I was like, let this, I'm going to like let balls fall on the floor and focus on these
Yeah.
one thing. And then I can pick up things as I may like transition in different aspects of my life and my business. So I'm not sure if that's something you agree
Yeah.
about, or maybe you teach that in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's makes a ton of sense, and I agree. Trying to balance 6, 7 parts of your life, 6, 7, 8 parts of your life, manic. That is also that becomes then you're a high achiever. We're talking about high achiever across life. I don't know that's possible all the
Not
time.
sustainable.
It's not sustainable, and I even look back as you were telling the story. So I did my own. I knew I was going to be out of balance, so I focused heavily off balance on exercise because I knew that
Mhm.
physical part would sustain my mental health. And then when I was on the road, I focused on eating right. I didn't let the diet part go sideways. So I knew I had to be very careful what I ate. And when I finished everything, I was on the road, I was away from friends and family. One of the things I did was I parked myself in my daughter's house. I said, I am coming. I'm coming. That's about the warning I gave her. I didn't tell her how long I was coming. I didn't say anything other than I'm coming. And I grounded really deeply, Jason, just hanging out at the daughter's house with the 3 grandkids.
Mhm.
And for me, the most special thing in the world, that one moment when I woke up in the morning, it's about 5:30, and I could just hear this pitter patter of little 4-year-old feet going across the wooden floor. It just at about 5:30 in the morning, I'm laying in bed and I just hear this. I can hear a little something noise, maybe a voice, and then just this dun dun. And as she's kind of walking or running into her mom and dad's bedroom, past my door, and I'm just laying there, and I said, "Oh man, I'm home. I'm in the right place." That was just like that was an injection of I don't know how many body chemicals released into me at that moment, but
Sure.
it was magic, and I didn't want to leave. I was there for about 2 months, and
Hmm.
I just this is the most magical place. And so for me, that was a spiritual, mental health, everything coming together. Your whole life, you're a father, and then you become a grandfather, and to be connected to those to your family at that level, another whole nother level of things.
Hmm.
I hadn't really experienced that moment where it all kind of came together. But that one will sit in my memory forever. And so I was heavy weighted towards a few of the things in life that mattered, things
Hmm.
that really recharged my batteries. And maybe that is a good analogy to this. You have to plug that charger in, right? There's going to be different
Hmm.
things that are going to energize you and replenish you at different points. And so in that balance, as you're maintaining that balance, I think it's okay to get out of balance
True.
and to focus on different things because you may need different things at different parts of your life more than others.
For sure. Redefining, I think what we need to do on especially conclude this podcast episode. We feel like we have so much more to talk about, but redefining high achievers, high
Yeah.
achieving. I mean, I'm sure that if you have enough to sustain yourself financially, that's great. As long as you can pay the bills, that's great. If you have a little surplus to put into life insurance and other means by choice, go for it. But you got to see at the end of your life, Ken, you're not going to remember you're not going to be thinking about the dark times for sure. You're definitely going to not going to
Mm,
remember the many accounts that you opened. You're not going to remember the clothes that you
yeah.
bought. You're going to remember the little tiny steps that came across
Yeah.
your room when your grandkids were extremely young. Ironically so, as we're doing this podcast, my son came home from school and you hear him go, "Where's daddy?" And you can
Oh
hear him
man.
literally. He's right above us. The living room is right above us. And you hear that's funny. That so ironic how you said that. And you can literally hear him while we're talking about this podcast. And he's
There's
like, "Where's
there,
daddy?" And I'm like,
there are
"Nothing.
no coincidences, Jason. There's just connections. Right? There are
There's
no I don't believe in coincidences anymore.
no." And quite frankly, I want to leave this podcast as much as I'm having this great conversation with you. I want to leave this podcast and
Ab-
shut down my computer and just hug my son. And I think that again, those experiences, I think that
Absolutely.
it doesn't matter financially where you're at. I think that to be a high achiever is someone that just is happy. Happiness is what should
I,
define high
I
achievers.
I'd
So
agree. I'd agree. The happiness and contentment and taking, and that doesn't come. We look, high achievers can be in sports. They can be just a person on the street who's happy with nothing. You're winning. You're winning in life. If you're a high achiever, you're somehow winning in life. And boy, God bless the person. Some of the people I see here sitting out on the street and just enjoying life, and they don't have a lot, but the Vietnamese generally seem to be a very content people. And I love walking around and just seeing the smiles and the friendliness and just they found it. It still feels like they own it. They're still in that groove right now. And I hope listeners can find their space and find that balance. So you can be, like you said, a high achiever in life and not so much measure that financially, fiscally.
yeah,
Go
lastly,
grab that son, man. Go grab that son, pick him up and give him a big hug.
absolutely. I guess just like one more question for you, and I think we can end this here, and I'm sure hopefully we'll have more conversations. But when you're looking at somebody that is achieving a lot financially, it's what like we said, like you can delegate those financial things to spending more time with your family. You can spend more on
Mm,
vacations. I mean, there's a lot you can do financially that's not selfish. You can definitely do a lot.
yes.
And I would also say for anybody that is a high achiever, don't just go for the job that makes a ton of money. Like I didn't choose physical therapy because of the money. It's a doctorate.
Mm,
I think, quite frankly, most doctors of physical therapy are quite underpaid. Some make as little as $50,000, $40,000, and it's just not
yeah.
enough to sustain. So I think finding
Yeah.
a job and finding a career where you're passionate, you feel like you're helping people, you're being serviceable. I think that's part of it. It makes it feel less like a job. It feels like you're achieving more. And you know,
Absolutely.
I think as far as your profession, I'm sure you are doing great with your executives and helping them with these exact things that we just talked about we're not just high achieving professionals financially, but we can definitely be happier in so many places. And that's what I'm trying to do. At least my little dent in the world is to help people with pain, injury, help them feel stronger, more fulfilled, and take care of that aspect. But I think
Mm.
just bringing on people like yourself that come from a completely different background, but we still understand how important our mental health is to us.
Oh
It's world
yeah.
class. I think this podcast was amazing. And I don't know if you have any like final notes for people that like leaving any final notes and words of advice from you, considering you have so much to give, obviously.
Yeah, I think just the final, just wrap up a lot about what we talked about is making sure that you are aware of where you're at, like you're journaling, and making sure you're aware of where you're at on the different components of really being happy and being a whole person. Was the way I was talking to a client yesterday. He's saying, "Oh, you're talking about a whole person," and it's yeah, that's what it is, you know. So knowing where you're at, knowing when you're out of balance, having that red, green, yellow markers on those components of life, and getting out of the red zone when you can. Sometimes we have to, sometimes you're in the red zone, you're
Mhm.
going to be in the red zone. You got to eat that red zone. But you've got to,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
you've got to have a, you got to know how you're going to get into yellow and you can see the green. You're going to focus. I'm going to get to the green. I'm in the red right now. And it's okay because I know I'm in the red and I know why I'm in the red. And I think you can survive in that space for a time if you have a plan and you're aware. I think like the story of that young lady was she didn't know. She didn't see
Mhm.
it coming and she slipped into it. And you can't claw your way out of that with your nails. And you're not a, when you find yourself in that spot and you're not aware, I think that's a rough spot. That's the difficult situation for people. The observations or the advice is to be aware, to do these self checks. I
Mhm.
love that example that you gave.
Mhm.
And again, that if you are going to be in a red zone and operate in it, know you're in it, know why you're in it, and how long you're going to be there, and what the steps are to get out of it. And when you're in the green zone, just enjoy it. And just I was in the green zone, laying there in the bed, and I heard those pitter patter. I'm like, I'm not leaving the green zone. I'm in the green. I'm not leaving. And so when you find you're in this spot, swim in there, enjoy it, take off your clothes, dance around naked, and enjoy the time in the green zones and balance the rest of it.
Absolutely. Great message to end this with. I definitely think that this podcast that I think you have a podcast and I also have one that these types of things is part of my green zone. I love speaking with people and speaking with people advanced that has a lot of life obstacles that you've overcome. The fact that you found your calling doing all these things and interviewing people and having these sharp questions. So again, just want to thank you for being a part of this podcast and fulfilling my green zone for this past
Yeah.
hour. And I guess for anybody that's wanting more information about you or and wanting to absorb the things that you
Yeah.
put out there, where can they find you?
Yeah, so a couple places. One is a good one where you can see my story and see some of the podcasting stuff is the jar.live. I
Mhm,
also do a podcast called Mental Health Today. It's
mhm.
MHT podcast. That's also got a good bio and it's got a link to a lot of the other stuff. So mhtpodcast.com and then also Ken Stearns .com. I'm a little bit, yeah, as I'm going through it. Yeah. Okay. That's looks a little high achieving. So I've got three platforms or more that I'm operating under. But any one of those are great spots, and you can find out a lot more about me there.
Very cool. And I'll be sure to link that in the show notes so that people don't have to listen to the podcast. They can simply just go to the description section
Yeah.
and you'll be able to find all about what Ken Stearns is about and all the things that I think he can share as far as value in your own life, especially if you are a high achiever, high performer that
Mm.
wants more out of life. I think that he can definitely help. Thank you so much for your time, Ken. I really appreciate it. And that's what I got for you guys for this podcast today. If you have any questions or you want to leave a 5-star review, feel free to leave that in the comments. Apple Podcasts, we love if you can leave a comment, also a 5-star review. That way more people can be able to witness and be able to hear this
Yeah.
podcast as well. And I guess I'll leave you with this quote that I always leave with my audience all the time. We only have one body, one life. Make every action you take be one that makes you a better version of you. Take care. And thank you so much for your time, Ken.